What would cause a soul to not move on like so many others do?
Well, the little population that I and my prayer partners deal with, most died traumatic deaths, car crashes, shootings, stabbings, drownings, suicides, anything that took you from healthy to out of body for good. They needed extra help afterwards, after their sudden death, because it was so shocking. Some of them had been murdered, for example. It's been happening in my life for about 30 years. Uh, there'll be a dream in the night that I don't say I'm having a dream, I'm receiving a dream. I make a distinction between my own psychobabble and someone else's messaging. And I get a contact dream about once a week. Uh, Living in an urban setting as a Catholic priest,
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to my guest, Father Nathan Castle. Hello, Father Nathan.
great to be with you, Heather.
It is wonderful to be with you. I read your book and it is very interesting. And some new things, that I read about because you help, I guess you'd say, stuck souls move to the other side.
I do. With the help of some prayer partners. Yeah.
So what is a stuck soul?
Well, the book that you have read is the first
Mm,
in a series of three, and
okay.
that one came out in 2018. There's two that have followed. I got rid of the subtitle of Stuck in the subsequent ones because not all of the souls that we deal with really are. I thought of them as like spinning their wheels.
Hmm.
You must know somebody here who can't get traction in their life. Uh, a lot of times people who suffer from addictions or some compulsive behavior just can't seem to get unstuck. And I deal with some folk who are in the afterlife that are like that. But I also deal with some who died in a traumatic way that for a while had them just off balance, and they needed to somehow regroup, recenter before they could really move along in the afterlife to do adventures and start new projects or however you think of it.
So would this be what we would call ghosts?
Maybe disembodied spirits. um, you're a member of IANS, I believe, the
Yes.
International Association for Near Death Studies,
Hmm.
as am I. A lot of times when people talk about ghosts, they're really talking about persons that appear to be, uh, I don't like the word haunting, but it's the one that's commonplace, of staying around a certain space and not leaving that space. This isn't really that. I would just say, in Catholic parlance, I'm a Catholic priest, we would just say souls, but persons who are no longer in the body, in a this physical body anyway.
So you mentioned trauma. What would cause a soul to not move on like so many others do?
Well, the little population that I and my prayer partners deal with, most died traumatic deaths, car crashes, shootings, stabbings, drownings, suicides, anything that took you from healthy to out of body for good. I mean, because we deal with a lot of near death experiencers, they have their story to tell, but they come back. Well, a lot of people don't just nearly die, they actually die. My first book is on the Wizard of Oz, and the coroner in Munchkinland says she's not only merely dead, she's really most sincerely dead. And mine are sincerely dead, except that they needed extra help afterwards, after their sudden death, because it was so shocking. Some of them had been murdered, for example. You didn't know that was coming. Uh, Sometimes people have complicated deaths. You might have been inattentive while driving and caused an accident that not only killed you but killed other people. And so you might have a kind of a moral issue that only came about just as you were dying. Um, they're just, and then sometimes people die with, in addiction or mental illness or dementia. Sometimes they have, I don't get very many natural deaths. Almost all of mine are some trauma, blunt trauma to the body. But there are a lot of psychological states that people are in when they pass. And for some, they're just not ready to take up a new everything. to to have your whole life changed in an instant sometimes just takes some getting used to and some help.
So, give us a quick summary of how this process works and how you help them out.
Yeah, the basics of it has been happening in my life for about 30 years. Uh, there'll be a dream in the night that I don't say I'm having a dream, I'm receiving a dream. I make a distinction between my own psychobabble and someone else's messaging. And I get a contact dream about once a week. Uh, Living in an urban setting as a Catholic priest, frequently you have to take a turn being on the night shift in case there's an emergency at a local hospital. So I don't know if they use pagers anymore. I even have to explain what a pager is to younger people. But it's like those things that you get at the restaurant when your table's not ready, and it will glow and beep when it's time. I have been awakened in the night over the last 3 decades to answer a hospital call. And when the first of these afterlife ones happened, it felt like that. Somebody needs me and they need me now, and they're giving me a message. So I sit up, and the dreams are people tell their stories in different ways, but lots of them are car crashes. And so I might be on the sidewalk next to a place where a wreck occurs. I might be in the back seat. I might be the driver. I might be hovering above it as though from a drone. It depends on how the person tells the story. But I write the story down as quickly as I can, and then I say a quick prayer over them and introduce myself and say, "I got it. Here's what I got. I'll be in touch very soon. I'm going back to bed now." And so, usually within a few weeks, I've scheduled different prayer partners that are in different parts of the country. We meet via Zoom, and we dedicate a couple of hours to helping people move. And it usually only takes us about 40 minutes per person. So we schedule a 2-hour block of time, and we do two during that block.
I assume the dreams are different than your regular dreams, and that's how you can
Absolutely.
tell? Okay.
I've never driven off a cliff. I've I've never been drowning. I've
Mhm.
never been shot. There's so many experiences that they relate that have nothing to do with my narrative that it's quite clear. Oh yeah, this is one of those.
Do you have an example that you can share of somebody that came to you and then you helped them cross over?
I do, but I know you've read the first book. Is there one in the first book that stands out in your mind you'd like we could talk about?
I guess I was intrigued by the girl that was swept up in the tsunami. I
She's
thought
lovely, Ronnie.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to get to help your audience understand, so I'm asleep, and now I'm dreaming that I'm on a beach, and I'm pretty sure I'm in the Indian Ocean, and uh, there's suddenly this huge wave coming. It was a Sunday morning, and the young person who was relating it was actually 12, but she felt like 20. Um, and she had a lot of shame in the story. But I was pretty confident that it was the tsunami, that huge one that killed 250,000 people. I think it was the day after Christmas a few years back. Um, so I wrote it down, and then when we did get to deal with it, uh, she was just lovely. She explained that she was the only child of two very well-educated parents. Um, they were, it was quite clear she was going to get a PhD and study something, but they were on holiday. They were uh, in Sri Lanka, the island nation just below India. And she was only 12, so her parents didn't let her go to the beach by herself. But they were sleeping in on a Sunday morning, and the beach beckoned, and she just thought, oh, it won't hurt anything. I'll go down to the beach by myself. So she not only drowned in the tsunami, but she did so disobeying her parents. And I worked at Stanford for 7 years, and there are a great many Asian students at Stanford. I don't mean Asian American, I mean Chinese and Singaporean and all of, and I saw firsthand that level of respect that young Asian people have for their parents and their aunts and uncles and all of that. It's a very big deal to die disobedient. And and then she felt responsible because she was the only one, the only child. Now she's ruined her parents' life by denying them not only of her presence, but any grandchildren they might have had. So she rolled up a lot of things into this one event and felt responsible for a great many things. So it was hard for her to move forward because she felt unworthy. She felt like a bad girl. And we learned talking with her, I felt all along that I was dealing with more of a college student and not a 12-year-old. And she said, well, that was the problem. My parents gave me access to great schooling, and I was around a lot of people my age who were interested in toys and games and things that didn't appeal to me. She really had the mind of a 20-year-old and the body of a 12-year-old. And she wanted to be treated like a 20-year-old, which is sort of why she gave herself permission to go to the beach without her parents' approval. So she was sort of caught in that uh, early teen thing about, am I a child or am I adult? And she died during that.
When she died, you mentioned that she had profound guilt. So I always, hear about near death experiencers saying that when they die, they're kind of released from just all the worries of this world. But it's interesting because many of the souls that you talk to seem to either carry guilt or anger or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, when we do hear of near death experiences and they are blissful and peaceful and all of that, there's still volition. The human agent, the human person still responds to events in their own way. And uh, I'm quite sure that many people who will die today in a traumatic way will receive the help that they need on the other side and move smoothly to this transition and on to what's next. But some are just too overwhelmed or guilty or angry. There's something that means we're not moving forward quite yet. For example, I have one woman who, when they started proposing to her that there were new things that she could do, she was angry because she didn't even get to finish raising her children. She died suddenly with young minor children. She thought it was her life's purpose to get them to adulthood, and that was yanked away from her. And when people started offering her alternatives about sort of your next mission or your next project, she didn't want to hear any of it. She just thought, I just got ripped off from my last one. I'm not really interested in having another one. So
How did you help the girl from the tsunami eventually then make it into the heavenly realm?
they don't come to me unless they're vetted. They're not random.
Hmm.
Um, they have a care team on the other side, including their guardian angel. That's the language I would use as a Catholic Christian. Other people might say a spirit guide, or you have some other language for the same thing. But I believe we all do have what I call a guardian angel, and our angel stayed with her and explained to us a little bit of the background to help us out. But she had already cooperated with a team of helpers that helped her move from those initial ideas. And sometimes people just need to go easier on themselves. They can be their own worst critic. They helped her say, well, the truth is, yes, you did disobey your parents. That's true. Can you live with that truth? That you ruined their life? No, that's not true. That will be up to them to live. When you have a child, there's no guarantee that you are going to outlive that or that child is going to outlive you. Plenty of parents in world history have suffered the death of a child, and now your parents have. But that doesn't mean their lives are ruined. That's up to them. And so just simple truths like that. And then kind of breaking down some of the false language in one's head. Um, I don't know your whole story, but surely there was some point at which somebody told you you were stupid or would never amount to anything or you're not good enough or whatever. And all of us have some of these negative tapes that can reassert themselves and try to get us to believe things that aren't true. And most of us fall for that at least part of the time. And that doesn't stop at death. That can follow,
It
but
does.
it can. But I'm a Christian, and one of the ways that Jesus spoke of himself is to say, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And whether I believe that anybody that moves towards truth is moving toward the oneness of how whatever the whole universe is, and all the spirit. If you move towards truth, it's always a good idea. And some of these people, like her, had some um, exaggerated ideas that were not completely true and were unhelpful to her progress. So when they identified what they were, and she could see the truth of what they were saying, she could begin to change her mind.
I recall that she ultimately said something like, let people know that leaving this life is like stepping out of a dirty clothes.
Dirty clothes. Yeah, she used that image, uh, which is interesting because as a Catholic, people bring up purgatory quite a lot. And to purge means to cleanse. And so some of the metaphors that people use is that they felt like they were wearing dirty clothes, or that in some way there was something nasty attached to them and they needed to let loose of it, be showered or something. Anyway, that was, she talked about dirty clothes.
When you do send them on their way, do you think they're going to purgatory?
They never use that word, not even once. I've done more than 600 of these, and that word has never, ever been used. Um, but the idea of it makes perfect sense to me that when we leave here, uh, we're we're on a continuum, and we're energetic beings while we're in this body and after we leave it, and they're moving. They very do often use a metaphor of ascending, of going from down to up. You've been in radio and television. Did you do radio at some point?
Uh, when I was still in college, I just did an internship at a radio station, but mainly it was television and
Well,
digital.
particularly when we used to have to fiddle with the knob on an AM,
Yeah,
FM radio, like when
right.
you're in the car traveling and you're trying to listen to something and keep it, you're getting further and further from the signal. Part of it has to do with the radio band has strata. You know, there's one signal with this level, another signal. That's isn't that why if FM is further in the atmosphere than the AM is, and they do something that involves a movement upward when they leave where they are and go to somewhere else. They often talk about it as leaving behind a level that you could return to if you wanted to visit. If you really loved your third grade teacher and now you're in fourth grade, there's nothing to prevent you going from dropping by the classroom and saying hello. You can come back and visit, but it's not your homeland anymore because you've ascended to a higher level.
And then speaking of levels, a lot of the people in the book that I read talked about heaven in ways that were similar to things we see on earth. And I hear that in near death experiences,
Yes.
but I also hear people that have gone to these other realms, or they've been out in space and they've seen galaxies and various things. Have you learned anything about, people can go to various places?
In addition to doing this particular work that's described in my 3 Afterlife Interrupted books, I also pay attention to a lot of near-death experiencers and out-of-body travel and a lot of these other things. And so your particular question, information that I have about it comes more from that source than it does from my books. Uh, but one of the things that we do with the people that come to me, and my partners for this work, we never tell their stories publicly without going back to them a second time and asking their permission. And when we do that, it might be a year later. And we did that with Ronnie. And we learned that she did. Do you remember she was greeted by all of her ancestors?
Yes.
She said they're arranged something like bowling pins.
Yes, I remember that.
There's one in the front and then two, and it was like this wedge of ancestors going back centuries. It seemed like infinity. That was important for her because she felt like she shamed her family and that she somehow ruined the natural order of her family line. And so her whole family line showed up to say, "We're just fine. Why don't you come and be with us? You don't need to worry that you've somehow wrecked everything. All you did was die. And you were going to die young or old, and you died young."
It's also an important message for a lot of people that, worry they won't be reunited with their loved ones. And just like her mentioning this to you, so many near-death experiencers also talk about, meeting ancestors and even ancestors they've never met.
Yes, that happens quite a lot. And then there's another subset of it because a lot of people are at odds with at least somebody in their family. And the blanket idea that it's going to be wonderful, you're going to get to meet all your family. Some people, uh, that sounds too scary. Uh, but one thing that can happen is that as people um, live on the other side, if you want to call it that, and if they're receptive to the healing work that is offered them, you might get to know a whole healthy, healed version of a person who you knew is primarily mentally ill or drug addicted or something like that. It might have been that the behaviors that came your way from them were not ever from their real true self to begin with. It was always clouded in other stuff. And some of that other stuff has fallen away, and you might get to meet, a happier whole version of a loved one that didn't treat you so well.
I often will hear people say that very thing that, they don't want to meet somebody up there. But I do think that things definitely change, not only with them, but in our mind as well, when we are reunited with people.
And there's a whole network of helpers. For example, I mentioned earlier that I've known people that died in traffic accidents that they caused, and then they feel terrible that they killed other people, and they say, I want to apologize," and they'll often be told, that's a noble thought, but it's not yet timely, and we'll let you know when it is, because that needs to be mutual. Reconciling takes two parties, and they're often told, "That's lovely. Thank you for that, Heather. It's just not yet. We'll let you know when it's time."
What happens to people that don't go to somebody like you? I mean, do people ever just sit in limbo, not able to cross and not sure what to do?
Well, I don't know what I don't know.
That's true.
My undergraduate work was in sociology, and in the social sciences, you're trained to observe behavior,
Mhm.
often under some kind of controlled conditions, and then you uh, you somehow track the behavior and quantify it. What I've been doing all along with this work, for at least for 20 years or more, is recording everything. So I have my smartphone and I have an app on it that all I do is hit record when we go into a session. And the computer is on because I'm on a Zoom call with a couple of partners. But next to the computer is the phone, and it's recording the whole session. When I push a button, it transcribes it into a Word document. So I have the whole text of everything that was said. I don't have to do it from memory. So I try to store all that away for for my own use and for after I'm gone, because I think this would be a valid field of study for somebody doing research. Um, but I try not to go beyond the data. I just say, here's what I heard and saw. Then, if people like you ask me, well, what do you think about it? I try to draw a line and say, well, I don't know, but here's what I think. I've now forgotten your question. It's just such a long answer.
Do you believe most or all would eventually move on?
That's my hope. And I've dealt with some who have been dead for centuries, who might have appeared to be making no progress at all. But, you know, We can't watch our fingernails grow or our hair, but it does. Uh, some things are incremental and slow, and sometimes people have reasons why it took them as long as it did. And one of the consistent things that I've seen is people are delighted in that it's a no shaming zone. Nobody's inflicting new harm. Nobody's making fun of you or making you feel like you should have done more by now than this and so on. And one of the things, in the life review that NDE people talk about, um, yeah, I don't know if your audience is familiar with the life review.
Yes, I'm sure they are.
The general form of it is that a person moves out of body and they find themselves, they often describe the sensation of floating in love, being surrounded by love and uh, and being delighted because they've never been in anything quite like this before. They're in a completely loving environment, and then some people might begin to emerge into it with you, and they might be kids you knew in junior high, and it might be that you thought you were just having fun picking on people or being snarky or whatnot, and you thought that you said something offhand that was funny and everybody laughed and it was not offensive. But then you learn later that the person who was aimed at was really hurt by it, but they didn't dare show it. And so they'll show you a scene like that, and they show it to you from the point of view of other people, including the person you harmed, and you get to feel their feelings. And then you go, oh, geez, I wouldn't wanted to do that. Mental note, don't do that again. Uh, uh, I've seen something analogous to that in the work that my prayer partners and I do, where people are just brought to a new level of awareness about their lives. And some of it isn't negative. It might have just been you did some offhand act of kindness that you've long forgotten, but it had a huge impact on someone and changed the course of their life. So I've seen both of those things in the work that we do.
Do you have a favorite story that you could share with us of somebody you helped and how they moved on?
I have one that's current, that's not in any of the books, but I also have a podcast. And one of the things that we do on my podcast is we'll do what we call a trilogy. We'll tell a new story. That usually takes me about half an hour to do. And it's not in writing anywhere, so I can't refer people to go find the text because it's not available. I tell the story, and then we do in the second part of the trilogy what we call compassionate response. Compassion means to suffer with, and these people have gone through a trauma. So you, the audience, and me, participant in it. What kind of compassion does it evoke? And then the third part of the trilogy is what we call spiritual practice, something from the Catholic Christian tradition that I'm familiar with that comes to mind because of this story. Well, anyway, I'm telling a story right now that happened not long ago. 3 generations of men going boating one day with one of those trailers that's pulled behind a truck with a small boat on it. You go to some state park or somewhere where there's a cement ramp where you back it down into the water. Somebody needs to stay with the boat because you're unlatching it from the trailer that it was riding on. Now somebody needs to be with the boat. Then somebody had to be there in the middle to unlatch it from its connection to the trailer, and somebody's driving the truck. So the grandpa was in the middle, grandson is driving, and the middle generation guy, the dad, grandson was already with the boat. The boat was in the water. Now it's time to pull the trailer out of the way so other people could use the ramp. It was a cold day somewhere in the Great Lakes. That was the reason why the grandson had the windows of the truck rolled up, and he couldn't hear the screams when his grandfather got his ankle caught in a chain and was pulled along the ground at a low rate of speed. You wouldn't be, you know, speeding, pulling a trailer out of a boat ramp, but it was enough that he hit his head on a stone, became unconscious, and they did medical interventions for 2 or 3 days that didn't work, and he died. So that's a really tragic story. But the guy, he went by he wanted to go by an initial because he said so many of the people involved are still here, and if they were to hear your show, uh, uh, he said it's okay by me if they did, but I'd rather not give my name. I'd rather just give my initial. I know what his name is. He's going by the initial A. And uh, he came to me and showed me that scene. And when we went into prayer with him, it turned out that um, his son and his grandson are both blaming themselves for his death. And he said, that's holding me back some. I wish I can't get through to them, and I wish I could just say to them to get over it. That it was an accident, and he said, "Does it accidents happen? Do they really have to be somebody's fault? When something is truly accidental, do you need to blame anybody?" He said the irony was, I was an old man. I taught my children and grandchildren to pay attention to what they were doing, and I was the one that didn't pay attention. I was the one that had my ankle in the wrong spot. Nobody but me was in charge of that, and even I wasn't. It was an accident. So we're helping him move along, and we always want to say, now that you're ready to go, you've gotten through some of these things. He said, I paid attention to the present moment my whole life, and I focused on what I was doing. And I've kind of taken a bit of a time out from that. And now it's time for me to return to that practice. There are new things for me to do now, and it's time to do the new things, not just, pine away about what happened the day I died or when the accident happened. So we helped him, and we said, well, who do you want to have come for you? And he said, well, I think I'm just going to be still. You can choose your whoever comes for you. But he said, I'm just going to be still and see what happens. So he was inside me because I was allowing him to use my voice. And he said, hey, this is terrific. It's Mitch. It's Mitch. So my prayer partner said, well, tell us about Mitch. And he said, Mitch was my brother-in-law. Um, you know how people say at weddings, we're not losing a daughter, we're gaining a son. Well, my older sister married Mitch, and I told her, if you hadn't married that man, I would. He's such a wonderful, he said, I wasn't homosexual. He wanted us to know that. But he said, he was just such a wonderful human being. And we had both had long, happy marriages in the same small town. We did Little League and we did Kiwanis, and people wanted to be around our families, not because we were rich, but just because we were happy. And he said, Mitch is here for me. And he said, well, that's wonderful. My partner said, that's wonderful. And he said, except he's going to have some fun with this. He's pretending he's at the rodeo, and he has a lariat, and he's going to rope me and drag me across. And if he tries it, I'll smack him. So just guys having fun. And he didn't really do that. He just was having a little play with it. But when we returned, it turned out that that Mitch had one of the earliest Thunderbirds from the late 50s. He said when they were small and sporty. And some of the times it ran and other times it didn't. But it was always kept in a detached garage across the lawn. And he said, come over here. And he drove up in the Thunderbird and said, hop in. And they rode off in the Thunderbird. So that's the story that we're telling right now on my podcast.
One of the things that stands out to me about that story is that there's humor.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I love hearing that about the other side.
Me too. And there's plenty of funny people die.
Very true.
And that doesn't mean they have to be all somber and serious all the time just because they have died. They take their personalities with them.
You have had a dog close to you die recently. I've also had my beloved Charlie die. And I'm curious if you've ever had any encounters just with animals. I mean, probably you're not helping them cross over. I imagine they cross over pretty easily, but
I haven't directly, not in the work that I describe in the
yeah.
book, although I network as you do with a lot of people with lots of different gifts. And
Mhm.
I think Sue London, do you know Sue?
No.
She's in Canada, I think, and she's an animal communicator. St. Francis of Assisi had that gift of animal communication, as did St. Martin de Porres, who's a member of the Order of Dominicans that I belong to. So I know that in our Catholic tradition that exists as a thing. And uh, I've had people who have been in touch with me since Toto died to let me know that he's okay. And one of them indicated that Mother Mary was holding him, and he liked to be held. He was only 7.5 pounds, and so he was easy to pick up and hold on to. Uh, but Pope Francis, early in his pontificate 10 years ago or so, was asked, but near an open mic, uh, a 10-year-old child, Italian child, had lost a pet and asked, about his dog, and Pope Francis said, "Well, heaven's big enough for all God's creatures." And then the kind of spin control people started making sure that everyone understood he wasn't changing doctrine. Uh, but I kind of land there. I just live in joyful hope that. And then I remember being in first grade in like 1962, and the nun answering that question in first grade. Uh, uh, and she reasoned with us and said, "Children, isn't heaven the place where God provides everything you need to be completely happy?" And we said, "Yes, sister." She said, "Well, if you needed your dog to be completely happy, wouldn't God then have to provide it?" "Yes, sister." And so that was not some brand new, liberal novelty. That was just my first grade teacher, a St. Joseph sister, teaching little children how to imagine uh, how this all might work.
Pastor John Burke, who was a guest of mine early on doing this podcast, he said that heaven will never be less than, the things we have here on earth. It will always be more.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and I loved that. As an animal lover, I also had a friend that told me after one of my pets died that when her mother was dying, she was kind of going back and forth between that world and this world. And as she was doing that, she was looking up and she named all of their pets that
Oh
they
yeah.
had when they were children and that they were coming for her. And I just thought that was really neat too.
I talk to Toto as though he can hear me. I trust that he can. I hope that he can. He was also a soul that had a hard start in life. He was in some sort of puppy mill, or, what on the. You're a news reporter. Did you ever have to do one of those hoarding stories where some house was discovered with all kind of animals all over the place and illness and whatnot? Toto was in a place like that as a little guy.
I've certainly heard those stories and they're just so heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, he came into my friend and my life out of that circumstance, and I would be holding him while traumatized people move into my body with my permission. And so Toto is in our lab. We're sharing the lab, and Toto would be, and sometimes they're traumatized people, and they're also doing something they've never done before because they're moving into another person and using their voice. That freaks some people out enough to say that I'm doing the devil's work or something. I'm just not. It's just not. But sometimes Toto's presence in my lap when we were doing this work was helpful because many people love an animal, and that they would talk to him while they were doing what they needed to do that day.
Speaking of people freaking out, I encounter that too with people sharing things on my podcast that they've experienced during their near-death experience. And in your book, you mentioned 1 Corinthians 13:12,
Yeah.
and which basically expresses that, human understanding is not complete. It talks about as if looking at a dim mirror, and now we know only in part, and then we will know fully.
Yes, face to face.
And I think that really leaves the opening that there's so much more than we can even imagine. And I think what you're doing in near-death experiences, it just gives us a little bit of a peek into some of that.
Well, even I'm assuming that you love and are loved by someone close to you.
I hope so, yes.
And do you have somebody that you've been in such a loving relationship for a very long time?
Yes, I've been together with my husband since I was 19. So,
All right. Then you would probably say that you know him well,
absolutely.
and you would probably say he continues to surprise me.
So maybe sometimes, not always.
Very often, I find anyway, that even people that I've loved for a long time, you you know, you've never known them at this moment in their life. You might have known them in school. You might have known them when you were 19, but you've never met the 70-year-old version of them until now. And people keep changing, and relationships can keep changing. And I just think that people who love are kind of disinclined to say, I know you like the back of my hand. There's nothing new here. No news here. It's just the same old husband, the same old friend. Lovers keep looking for new ways to love. And one of the ways to do that is pay attention to the beloved, and to, you know, take note of something that might be changing, that might be subtle, that you want to pay attention to.
And I was joking, by the way. He does surprise me often, so he does.
Watch your show or listen to it.
But I have to razz him a bit because I'm sure he'll listen to this.
Yeah, all right.
So, have any of your beliefs about the afterlife changed since you've been doing this work?
The answer has to be yes, but it wouldn't be from black to white. It would be somewhere along a spectrum. Um, I've always liked the phrase "joyful hope." There's you ever been to a Catholic mass? When Catholics and Protestants both publicly say the Lord's Prayer together, we
Yes.
do fine until a certain point, and then it changes a little bit. In a
Yes.
Catholic mass, we stop at "Deliver us from evil." The Protestants in the crowd, if they're visiting, will continue to say, "For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory." That you'll know that they're not a Catholic, because we stop at "Deliver us from evil," and then there's a line that the priest delivers that says, "Deliver us, Lord, from every evil, and grant us peace in our day. In your mercy, keep us free from sin, and protect us from all anxiety, as we wait in joyful hope for the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ." And then we say, "For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory." That phrase, waiting in joyful hope, is very important to me. And I think that I've seen people wait a short time or a long time. One of the ways that I was taught about purgatory as a destination after dying was that it was like a jail where you had to stay until your sentence was served. You didn't get a life sentence, but you got a period of time. And we could pray for people in purgatory and lighten their sentence, help it be shorter. What I've seen is, I don't think it's about sin as much as it is untruth of one kind or another, uh, misunderstanding something, or blowing something all out of proportion. Uh, when we believe something that isn't true, it usually has some credibility in it, or we wouldn't even entertain the idea. But we'll take something and blow it up in such a way that we can't move. And then fear is such a huge thing too. Uh, Sometimes people are afraid of their own emotions. I think that's why a lot of people that have emotional pain end up moving towards drug and alcohol stuff to numb pain, because I just can't stand to live in this fear. I remember dealing with a woman whose husband dropped dead in front of her. She didn't die a traumatic death, but her husband did, and she shut down. She even dissociated. She started saying, "What should a woman do when her husband dies suddenly? That woman probably ought to go to his closet and pick out the clothes he's going to be laid down in. That woman probably ought to call his employer. That woman probably ought to write an obituary." And she did that for the rest of her life. She never re-entered her heart. She lived next to it. And so there was a degree of inauthenticity about everything she did after that day. And she hoped that she was a Catholic and a Christian, and she hoped that when she died, it would all just go away and there would be a happy reset. She went to a nursing home, and she insisted that she only wanted the sickest, like comatose partners in her room, because she didn't want their visitors around. So she just curled up and entered the afterlife like that. And they worked with her, but they said, "You're moving slowly because that's your choice. And we're not going to push you, at least not very much. A gentle nudge, maybe, but nothing more than that. We're not forcing you to do anything you don't want to do." They would bring her little girlfriends from school. She in her 70s or 80s when she died, but they brought her kids that she knew in school who were now grown, and they would visit her and say, after we leave visiting here, we're going to go out to lunch, and one of these days you're going to come with us. So they were trying to give her new ideas about, how she might live. And they told her, it's just that you quit living a long time ago. You quit trying. And we can't do it all for you. We need you to get up and cross the room, try to put one foot in front of another, however you want to imagine it. And she did get all the way to where she needed to go. She got annoyed with herself because she said, I wasn't always the slow kid in school. It depended on the subject. Sometimes I even won the ribbon. And she was remembering that she could put forth effort that succeeded. And she decided, I'm going to start doing that at least part of the time. And she moved far enough to come to us. And she hated mending clothes. Do you ever mend clothes? You just throw them out?
I do mend clothes occasionally, like a sock, or
Put
maybe
a
take
button
out
on a
something.
shirt or something like that. Well, this is all this was, but she didn't like doing it. So she threw it all in a basket, and she'd only pay attention to the basket like twice a year. And she said, this day I decided was going to be mending day. I think she was before television. I think it was in the radio. Southerners sometimes refer to their living room as the front room. She was sitting in her front room with the radio on, and she said, nobody was there but me. So I would make it a fun thing by talking to the torn clothing. And I would say, you, Mr. Sock, you're going to be good as new any minute now. You just wait and see. And so she's busy talking to the mending while her husband walks into the room and dropped dead in front of her. And it's like she just shattered. Well, eventually at the end, when she was ready to move, she just said, I don't know who's going to come for me, but it'll be somebody nice because everybody here is so kind. And so she said, I don't need to pick. Somebody nice will show up. And she said she found me in a catalog. She said when it was time to pick somebody that would help in this movement, she said, I used to catalog shop from the Sears and J.C. Penney catalog. So they handed me a catalog of ways that this could happen. And I turned to the page, and there was this Catholic priest. And she said, I was a Catholic. So I said, I think I'll pick him. So that's how she got in my line. They call it a line. And she, when it was time to cross, she showed me, because she was within me, her husband, but he was 16. And she said, he's holding a bouquet of flowers, but they're not all the same kind the way they are in the store, because they came from his mama's yard. But he's holding them like a little bouquet, like we're going to go on our first date. And so and we just said, she had been afraid to allow herself to think of him because it hurt so much. And that was really her blockage. She couldn't think of him at all. And when eventually he showed up she said, I think I'm going to go on a first date. We don't have to relive everything we ever did, but we're going to have a fresh start. So that was her story.
I imagine that there's somebody listening who's worried about their loved one, that their loved one might be stuck. Is there anything that they can do to help?
One thing would be, sometimes they think of that because they have what they believe are evidences that that person might be near them, flickering the lights, messing with the cell phone, coins and butterflies and birds and different things, but especially the electronic stuff. For people that are around ions, this is quite commonplace. And sometimes they think, oh no, mama must be stuck because she's meddling with my computer. No, it just means mom is near and trying to get your attention. And it might just be that she loves you. And sometimes we want to be around our loved ones. So don't make it worse than it has to be, and imagine these things. Another would be, if you have a loved one who did die in addiction or mental illness or a lot of anger or upset, and it's been a long time since you could imagine them being at peace, try to go back to a time when they were at peace, even if you have to go back decades. Allow your imagination to settle on the fact that this person isn't necessarily as disturbed as the last time I saw them. And maybe their afterlife time has allowed them to shed some of that. The definition of the Catholic Catechism about the purpose of purgatory is to be released from unholy attachments, which to me sounds like Velcro, something that helps something attach to something else. That sometimes they're unholy attachments, and you'd be better off sloughing off the Velcro, not letting anything stick to you the way that it can and hurt you.
So, do we hold people back through either our grief or our guilt? And I think to the story you shared about the grandfather that died and how his grandson and his son, he kind of stuck around because they couldn't get over it.
That was still his choice. There was nothing automatic about it.
But if they had relaxed more, would he have felt better about moving on?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Um, but it's not a direct correlation. The fact that we're grieving deeply and painfully about somebody that's been gone for several years doesn't necessarily mean that they're stuck because they can't, because we're holding them back. That could be a factor, but it might not. It wouldn't be the whole of anything.
I also imagine that people that have happily moved on still sometimes maybe visit somebody in a dream that they loved here on earth. Is that true?
Yeah, my parents come to me regularly, and sometimes they help with this work. They show up and they'll help. But somebody, my dad helped somebody recently. My dad was in coastal shipping, and there was one of those clipper ships before they were even steam powered. So early 1800s maybe, was coming into a dock. That's all they showed me, and it turned out that there was a contagion on board that was killing a lot of the people. And the people that were steering the ship really didn't know what they were doing, but the ones that knew how died. And so the people on the dock could tell that these are drunken sailors or something. They don't know what they're doing. And so they sent out a small dinghy to talk to them and say, what's going on? And they said, maybe we shouldn't have told them that we had illness on board, because when we told them that, they refused to let us dock. They made us go away. And we were running out of water and food, and they turned us away. And we all died. We, uh, and so that was a story of being stuck. But there was this one, and sometimes people do stay together in a group. Sometimes they don't. But anyway, my dad, whose career was in harbor piloting, he steered ships and docked them. He showed up and helped this guy um, dock the ship. That was what he felt like he needed to do. He needed to, and they needed to be welcomed in a place where people weren't afraid of them. And my dad helped with that.
This has all been so fascinating. Your book was really interesting. I know people are going to want to read your book or find out more by watching your podcast. But as far as the book, I always like to ask, I know you've got more than one, so talk about them, but then let us know which one you would want people to start with. Would it be this one or one of the ones you've written since?
There are four total. The first one, if you're viewing this and not just listening, on the back wall behind me is a picture of a dog. My first book is And Toto 2, The Wizard of Oz as a Spiritual Adventure. That one's kind of topical because of Wicked and the
Right.
upcoming release of the second Wicked movie. I love that. I love doing retreats on the Wizard of Oz. It can just break open people. But the other three books, they all have 13 stories that are these afterlife stories. And if you're interested in that, start with the first one, as you have done. Uh, the other two follow, and so from 2018 to 2023, there's three books in that series. I do ask that people read at least one of them before they ask to talk with me. If people say, if they jump online and want to contact me, and I think we probably are about to give the information on uh, you know, website and all that, I ask that they read at least one book first. That way we'll have a better conversation when we have one.
And feel free to tell us how people can connect with you. And then I'll also put the links in the description for people.
It's just my name, Nathan Castle. So it's my website is nathan-castle.com. When you go on it, there's the contact thing that'll send you a drop down. And I always like to know for people to tell me where they live. Uh, I prefer to have a phone number because I'd rather talk than write emails. And I don't want to call them at an inappropriate hour. And because podcasts go all over the world, you could be waking somebody up in the middle of the night. So I'd like to know where they're from, and the drop down will have that on it. And then I try to get to everybody that I can, one way or another. I don't do ghosts, and I don't do messages. So I don't want to hear from people hoping that I will give them a message from grandma, or I will deal with the ghost and on the 13th floor or whatever it is. I'd stay away from those things because I've already got a full plate doing what I do.
And you are a very busy man with all the things that you are doing to help people, both alive and also those that have passed.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that you hope that the audience takes away from our chat today, what would that be?
I'm going to quote one of the persons in book 3. We use the subtitle, "Please let me explain," because some of these people explain themselves so well in English that we just ask them, is there a message from your life beyond the grave that you want to pass along? One woman, her husband and child had been killed in a traffic accident, and she just shut down until she died. Her message to the rest of us was, don't let the worst thing that happens to you define you.
Great advice.
Yeah. Yeah. You define who you are, and don't let some event that was tragic and traumatic just bully you, crash into your life and take over. You choose your life, and don't let the worst thing that ever happened to you define you.
Really great advice.
Yeah,
I think we all at times have defined ourselves with things that we do versus who we really are.
Yes, and when that happens, then when a really tragic thing happens, you can want to stack up other things,
Mhm.
And if that weren't bad enough, then the next day this happened, and oh my God, and then that, and before long, you're justifying how miserable you are to other people, and then you are in a loop.
Yeah.
Then, and her advice was, don't let the worst thing define you.
Father Nathan, I've so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being here
The time went
today.
by so quickly.
It did. It went by really quick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. God bless you.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I've never talked to anybody like Father Nathan and the things that he does. And I really found it interesting, and I hope you did as well. I would love to know your thoughts. So please jot them in the notes, into the comment section, I should say. And also, I'd be curious, since I haven't interviewed somebody like him before, is there any kind of a follow-up question that you wish I would have asked? Or if you were doing it, you would have asked? I would love to hear that as well. So jot those in the comments. You can also say I made it to the end, just something simple, or I made it. Anything you put in the comments always helps, but I do enjoy just hearing your opinions and your thoughts on various things. So it is fun when you put something like that there. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Also, if you haven't subscribed, do that. And if you want to share it with a friend, that'd be great. I will have the links to connect with Father Nathan. I'll put that in the description. Also, I have a book link in the description, and you'll not only be able to get to Father Nathan's books, but all the books I've ever mentioned on all of the episodes here on Beyond with Heather Tesch. So it may be something you want to check out. I'll also have there a link to memberships if any of you want to check out becoming a member. I appreciate all of your support. So thank you for those of you that are members. I really do appreciate it, but no obligation for any of you to do that. Also, I have a link there to my shop, or you can probably see it down below as well. Those are all different ways that you can support me. And of course, the big way is just coming back week after week. Please come looking for me. YouTube will not necessarily send me out to you. You probably watch lots of other things, so they're going to hit you up with other kinds of things other than this. So please always come looking. I do have a new episode out every week, and I've got some great guests that are coming up. So I do hope I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.